Okay, sorry, there was like a little interruption there on my recording device. So now I'm going to continue on. All right, last night I said when Jesse and I were thinking about the case, we remembered Deke Rifkin's handwriting. It was neat and perfect too. It looked exactly like the pranksters, said Jesse, but it wasn't until Stevie mentioned it this morning that I made the connection. Leopold Zimmer also had that neat teacher-type handwriting, I added. I saw it yesterday in his notebook. Galen looked stricken. Leopold Zimmer? I can't believe that one of the world's most respected dog authors is involved in a shabby business like this. He's not, I said. But you just said... The Leopold Zimmer we met yesterday wasn't the real Leopold Zimmer. It was the prankster pretending to be Leopold Zimmer. The real Leopold Zimmer looks like this. I held up the book Justin had brought from the library. It was a hardcover copy of everything you ever wanted to know about dogs. Unlike the paperback that I had been reading, this one had a photograph of the author inside the back cover. The man in the picture was about 60 years old, round as a pillow, and almost totally bald. That's Leopold Zimmer, said Galen, or she asked, squinting at the book. Why, he's just a little old dumpling. I nodded. The Leopold Zimmer we met was a total fake. Halliday turned to Rifkin. Okay, buddy, your turn. What do you have to say about all this? For a moment, it looked like Rifkin was going to deny everything. He puffed out his shoulders, clenched his jaw, and gave Halliday a top dog stare, just like you'd expect a Secret Service man to do. He looked as if he might try to bluff it out. It's over, Deke, muttered Jesse. Time to face the music. Slowly, Rifkin stepped forward. He took off his sunglasses, and then he removed his suit jacket so we could see the football pads that had bulked out his shoulders and chest. Next, he reached up and pulled off the brown wig. The mustache came next. A little bushy strip. Finally, his nose. Well, not all of it, just most of it. The nose was his, and it was all that was left with all he was left with was a medium-sized regular sort of nose. The man who stood there was no one I had ever seen before. I mean, I'd seen parts of him. I recognized Mrs. Worthington's chin and Leopold Zimmer's ears and Baby Lawrence's mom's nose, but the guy himself, he was a stranger. A perfectly ordinary stranger. Medium thin, ordinary height, average looks, someone you would never notice in a crowd. My name, he said, is Bob Jones. I am the man you know as the prankster. Whoa, that's interesting, isn't it? All right, guess what? We only have one chapter left, so I'm going to keep on reading because that one was super short and we're almost done with our book. Chapter 20. For about 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Jesse asked the question that was on everyone's lips. Why? He stared dumbfounded at Bob Jones. I could tell that he was thinking about his shoebox full of articles. Why'd you do it? Pull all those weird pranks? Bob Jones sank onto a plastic chair and ran his fingers through his thin, graying hair. I'm not sure that any of you will be able to understand, he said. You see, I'm a writer. I don't write about dogs. The girl's correct about that. No, I write novels. I've been writing them for 10 years. Recently, I just finished my 5th. Bob Jones? I don't believe I've read... Of course not, Bob said, and his mouth dropped into a pout. Nobody has read any of my novels. They're all in a closet in my bedroom. I send them out to publishers, but nobody wants to publish them. Why not? Asked Jessie. Because they're boring. Every one of them. Boring, boring, boring. And do you know why? Nobody answered. Because I'm boring. My life is boring. Even my name is boring. Bob Jones. What kind of a name is that? Look at me. I'm a walking yawn. Wait a minute, I said. I thought people wrote books out of their imaginations. They do. That's my other problem. I have no imagination. Do you know what color my socks are? Gray. All of them. Do you know what I have for lunch? A cheese sandwich. Every single day of my life. Do you see what I mean? He stared glumly at the floor. But when he raised his head a moment later, a sparkle came into his eye. 6 months ago, I had my first really good idea. What if I found a way to make my life more exciting? What if I found a way to get close to some really exciting people? Wouldn't it rub off just a little? The prankster? Asked Jessie. Bob Jones smiled as if he'd eaten something delicious. Yes, the prankster. Oh, it's been so fun. I've met such fascinating people, like that Chicago Bull, for instance. We had a wonderful conversation through the broom closet door. A little one-sided, of course, but I enjoyed every awful angry word that he said. And the disguises, he went on, rubbing his hands. They've been the most fun of all. I was disguised as a stagehand, then I snatched the opera singer's toupee. I was a maid when I snuck into the Prime Minister's hotel room. At the basketball game, I was wearing a grizzly bear costume. Do you know you can go almost anywhere in a sporting event when you're dressed as the team mascot? And lately, well, just think, I've been a young mother, a Secret Service agent, a wealthy doctor's wife, and a famous dog psychologist, all in 1 week. Halliday stepped closer and cleared his throat. Mr. Jones, before you go any further, it's my duty to tell you that you have the right to remain silent. I knew what that meant. Bob Jones could call a lawyer. Halliday said some other stuff about Bob Jones' rights and how he would have to write his story down in an official police statement. I'm going to have to ask you to come along now, said Halliday. We'll take your statement at the station. The station? Bob Jones looked heartbroken at the thought of giving up his audience. Then he noticed the reporters pressing in. Just a moment. Whipping out a comb, he ran it through his thinning hair. He cleaned his teeth with his tongue and straightened the front of his shirt. Does anyone have a mirror? He asked. When nobody answered, he held out his arm to the police. Okay, I'm ready. As the door opened, the photographer's lights flashed and the video camera started to whir. Bob Jones stepped into the crowd with his police escort and an enormous smile on his face. He made a full confession at the police station. Jessie and I managed to get a peek at it in Halliday's office after he wrote our statements. Jessie kept saying that we shouldn't look. He said the statement was police property, and it was probably against the law to peek, and if we weren't careful, we'd end up sharing the prankster's cell. But I said that if Detective Halliday didn't want us to see the statement, that he wouldn't have left it on the edge of his desk when he stepped out. Anyway, here they are. Bob Jones' exact words. Written statement by Robert Jones. The first time I saw the dog on TV, the night the president arrived, I knew I had to have her. What a kick it would be to own the president's dog. Even if I couldn't tell anyone who she really was, she would still be the ultimate addition to my prankster collection. Now, I don't know a lot about dogs, but I do know they have to be walked. The president's hotel was right beside Stanley Park, so I had a pretty good idea of where the dog would be walked. I borrowed my neighbor's mountain bike. He'd never miss it, and got myself a biking outfit and a mask. After that, it was just a matter of waiting. I was hoping the president would walk the dog himself, but I guess that was just too much to ask anyway. When his secretary came out with Marietta on Sunday morning, I was ready. I followed them into the park. My chance came at the water fountain. The secretary stopped to take a drink, and stealing the dog was so easy. It was almost embarrassing. I just raced up, snatched the leash, grabbed the dog, and rode hard. How could the secretary possibly catch up on foot? She couldn't, of course, and I was laughing to myself as I slipped away. But I didn't laugh long. The dog got hysterical. She drove me nuts with all that yipping. I stuffed her into a basket on the back of the bike and raced out of the park and across the bridge. That's when I lost her. Just as I got off the bridge, she wiggled out of the basket and ran down beside the water. There's some wild brush down there, and she disappeared into it. I looked and I looked, getting filthy with burrs and mud, but I couldn't find her anywhere. I can't tell you how mad I was. And then it got dark, and I went home. In the morning, I went out to look for her. I searched underneath the bridge and on all the streets nearby. On one of those streets, I saw a couple of people walking a bunch of dogs. Well, that caught my interest, and I looked closer. One of the dogs was green. I was getting a little chuckle out of it when the green dog let out a yip. Imagine my shock. It was Marietta. I had no idea how she'd ended up green, of course, but it looked like getting her back would be simple. I put on a leather jacket and a red wig that I keep in my backpack for emergencies, and I walked right up to the dog walkers. What I didn't count on was the German Shepherd. That is one big animal. Mean, too, and keen to protect Marietta. As soon as I got close to her, he started growling and snapping. Between that and Marietta's yipping, well, I figured I'd be better back off. There had to be another way. I followed them back to that dog daycare place and hung around, hoping to catch Marietta without the German Shepherd. Marietta did come out eventually, but this time she was in the kid's backpack. The kid got onto a bike and rode away. Stealing a dog out of a backpack, that's on a kid who's on a moving bike, well, that's a little tricky. So I followed the kid home. Later that night, I snuck into the courtyard outside her house and slashed her bike tires. I figured that if she was on foot, it would be a lot easier to grab the dog. Next morning, I disguised myself as a mom, snitched a baby carriage out of a backyard, and found a good spot to ambush the kid. My plan was simple: grab the dog, ditch the carriage, and run away. Unfortunately, the kid brought another kid along, that boy. He got in the way of everything, and the dog took off, yipping like mad, and man, was I cheesed. I decided that the only thing to do was to get inside the dog daycare. For that, I'd need a dog. I borrowed my Aunt Flora's dog, a rotten little Pekingese named Pugsley. Pugsley the Pain, I call him. I snuck a few of Aunt Flora's clothes, too, and worked up a pretty good imitation of the old doll. Then, calling myself Mrs. Worthington, I strolled into the Barking Buddies, hoping to grab the dog, but I never got the chance. The second Marietta saw me, she started yipping all over again. And that got the German Shepherd going, and they ganged up on me. It wasn't fair. I had to leave. That was Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, I was feeling desperate. I figured that if I showed up disguised as a Secret Service agent, they'd have to give the dog to me, whether it yipped or not. So Deke Rifkin was born, and I went to Barking Buddies again, this time to demand the dog. Unfortunately, Marietta had run away. That was a real blow. I thought she was gone forever. Still, I kept my eye on the kids as they left Barking Buddies, and darned if Stevie didn't come out carrying Marietta in her arms. Was she lying about losing the dog? I couldn't figure it out. I decided to make one more try to get inside. This time I had a terrific idea. When I'd shown up at Mrs. Worthington, I'd heard Stevie and Gayleen talking on the phone to some famous dog expert. He said he was coming to do research next week. Neither of them had ever met him, and that gave me my new brainwave. Why couldn't I be Leopold Zimmer? Fake teeth, a wig, and false nose could do it as a disguise, and if I skimmed Zimmer's book, I could fake it as an expert. I'd tell them I needed to study the little green dog more closely, and presto, Marietta would be mine. It didn't work out that way. The problem was Gayleen. It was like she was glued to me. Frankly, I don't see how the real Leopold Zimmer is ever going to get away with any research done at Barking Buddies if Gayleen treats him that way. The other problem was the owner. She made a sudden decision to come in that day. When I heard that, I had to beat it. Dinny knows the real Zimmer. I wouldn't have fooled her for a second. All week, as I've tried over and over to grab the dog, it's been one frustration after another. If only I'd managed to catch the kid and the dog alone on foot, even once, I'm sure I could have gotten Marietta back. But no, one day they're on a bike, the next the kid's mom's going to get her, another day it's her dad, the boy was hanging around all the time too, and that big dog Brutus, I'm telling you, the kid was as heavily guarded as the Mona Lisa. Today was my last chance. I decided to give the Deke Rifkin disguise another shot. So I show up at Barking Buddies and I wait around half the morning. And what does the kid do? She walks in with the entire Vancouver Police Department and then points the finger at me. I'm telling you, it's almost funny. A kid. All that stuff I pulled and got away with, half the cops and reporters in Vancouver were on my trail, and me laughing at them, and in the end, who figured it out? A kid. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Signed, Bob Jones, otherwise known as the Prankster. All right, so there's one more little section, and I will do this next time. Talk to you later.